Hi, and welcome everybody. I think we'll get started with this session from the Texas Science Festival. Today, we're going to talk about coexisting with artificial intelligence, embedding ethics in education and practice. I want to thank the College of Natural Sciences for inviting Good Systems to participate in the festival. My name is Sharon Strover. I'm a professor in the Moody College of Communication, and I spend a lot of my time looking at various new technologies and how they intersect with and influence culture and economics and politics and social life. I'm currently also the chair of Good Systems, so I'm very pleased to be here with several of my colleagues from Good Systems, as well as from our guest, Will Griffin, as well. Good Systems, in case you don't know very much about it, is an interdisciplinary research effort here at UT. It is sponsored internally, focused on foregrounding ethics in the design and use of artificial intelligence technologies so that those technologies can best align with our needs and with our values in particular. And today we're going to talk about why AI systems should and how they could prioritize ethics and the importance of ethics in AI education as well. We'll look at some of the most pressing challenges in both the technology sector, but the challenges that all of society really faces. And also consider some of the opportunities that artificial intelligence presents. And in doing so, we'll underscore why embedding ethics in artificial intelligence is so very important for our future. There'll be a chance for some questions after our panelists address share some of their thoughts. At about 4:40 or so, we'll turn it over to the questions that you have generated. You can enter questions in the Q&A box, and I see already there's a few entries in the Q&A box, and you can add them even after the end of the session. You can upvote questions as well. We might not be able to get to all of the questions, but we'll try to figure out which are the most popular and address those in particular. And then finally, I wanted to make you aware that we are recording this webinar. So with that, thanks to our panelists, I'm going to introduce each panelist and then invite each one to offer a couple of very preliminary comments about their work. So, and I'll thank them right now for sharing their expertise with us. So I'll start by introducing my colleague, Ken Fleshman. Ken is a professor in the School of Information here at UT Austin. He's also the founding chair of the executive team for Good Systems. He is the founding director of undergraduate studies for the School of Information as well, for a degree in informatics for undergraduates. And he's the founding editor-in-chief of a brand new journal. It's an ACM journal on responsible computing. So his teaching and research focus on the ethics of AI and more broadly on the role of human values in the design and use of these technologies. So Ken, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Awesome. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Sharon. And it's really an honor to be here with such an awesome panel, and really appreciate everyone for being here. Yeah, I've been doing work in ethics of AI for over 20 years. So it's really exciting now that finally, I think this topic is getting some of the attention that it well deserves, given the exciting advances in AI and the degree to which people's everyday lives are impacted by AI. It's really important that we're considering the ethical implications. So I'm just really delighted that the general public is more aware of the role of AI and having these discussions, that policymakers, pretty much are forced to have these conversations, and also for technologists to be actively considering the ethical and societal implications of their work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next panelist is Will Griffin. Will is the Vice President of Product Strategy at Blockchain Creative Labs, where he is developing products to democratize the blockchain. Prior to that, he was the Chief Ethics Officer of Hypergiant, an enterprise AI company based right here in Austin. Will is the recipient of the 2020 IEEE Award for Distinguished Ethical Practices, and he's also the creator of Hypergiant's Top of Mind Ethics framework, which won the Communitas Award for Excellence in AI Ethics. So Will, would you like to share a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Sharon. And I also want to thank Ken and Leah for the invitation. I'm always excited and honored to join Good Systems because as we know, the industry is moving so fast, and it's always nice to have a live conversation real time with people who are tracking it. And so I think this is probably either my third or fourth year, probably from the beginning of Good Systems, participating in the program. And I think it actually enriches my work in industry, because typically in my prior gig at Hypergiant, we were a venture stage company. It still is a venture stage company, but we're a venture stage company. So we were trying to meet the needs of investors. And now I'm at a much bigger company, Fox, and we're trying to meet the needs of quarterly earnings. And I think when you're in those environments, you don't always have the time, or at least take the time, to reflect on the work that you're doing and its impact. So that's why I'm always excited to join a Good Systems event, because it gives me a time to reflect, and I always have something new to take back to my work. So I appreciate that. I think this is an exciting time for AI, particularly because a lot of things that we worked on, at least when I was at Hypergiant, are things are confidential, or they're sensitive. We did a lot of work with defense. We did a lot of work with the intelligence communities. We did a lot of work with space. And then we did a lot of work with commercial industries that are very competitive with each other. And they don't really want you to produce case studies and disclose all the things that they're working on. But we're fortunate to be living and working in this industry at a time when ChatGPT hit the market, because now it's the most downloaded app in the history of technology, and now it's part of the cultural zeitgeist. So now it gives us the opportunity and the freedom to speak about AI in public. And people are very interested in the general public in what we have to say. And I think it's bringing to fore a lot of ethical issues that people want to discuss, and we can do it in a way with a common lingua franca that more and more people are aware of what AI is doing in their lives. Even if it's something like ChatGPT, it gives us a great opportunity to further this conversation. So I'm honored to be here today, and I look forward to sharing and learning.
Great, thank you very much. Lots to unpack in what you just said too. Our third panelist is Peter Stone. Peter is the Truchard Foundation Chair in Computer Science and is a University Distinguished Teaching Professor at UT Austin. He's also the Associate Chair of the Computer Science Department, the Director of Texas Robotics, and a founding member of the Good Systems executive team. His research focuses on artificial intelligence, including machine learning, multi-agent systems, and robotics. Dr. Stone serves as the executive director of Sony AI America as well. So Peter, some opening comments from you?
Sure. Thanks for the kind introduction, Sharon. And it's great and an honor to be on the panel with Ken and Will and you. And thanks to Leah for helping organize. So yeah, like Ken said, I've been working in AI for more than a couple decades now. I think even a little longer than Ken. I'm getting to the 3-decade mark of working in AI. But unlike Ken, I haven't been really focused very much on the ethics aspect of AI until recently. For when I started in the field, it was not nearly as popular a topic as, and frankly, is, in my opinion, as essential a topic. People were ahead of their time, like Ken, thinking about these issues that would come up if and when AI got to the sort of point of public penetration that it has now. But at that time, I was focused entirely on the technical aspects of how do we make computers more intelligent, and that's what I continue to focus on in my research. But in recent years, I have been involved in many more endeavors and that involve ethical AI. For one, I was the study panel chair of the first 100-year study on artificial intelligence, and I'm now the chair of the standing committee. That's a group that puts out reports every 5 years over the course of the century is the plan. There have been 2 reports so far, and it touches on many of the issues of it's a group that's charged with thinking about what are the realistic benefits and the realistic harms of AI. And like Will said, we're at a moment now where people are learning about artificial intelligence. It is becoming sort of part of the public vernacular. It used to be that people only thought about AI based on what they learned in the movies or from science fiction novels. Now people are becoming much more literate and conversant, but I think it's still there's a lot of sort of tendency of people to exaggerate both the capabilities and the risks. And I think it's really important to make sure that we try to educate people about what are the realistic benefits and how do they get sort of fairly distributed across society, and also what are the realistic harms, and there are those as well, and what should we be worrying about, how should we be thinking about them. This will come up as well, but like Will, I do have an appointment in industry as well. I am executive director of Sony AI America, and one of our main efforts on the team is ethics of artificial intelligence. We have a robust team, and I think every large corporation now is forced to have such a deep engagement with the ethics of AI. Any company that's developing the technology needs to think about these issues. And then, so I can talk about that. And finally, this past semester in the fall of 2022, myself and another instructor in the computer science department, Tina Peterson, taught for the first time a graduate class on introduction to ethical AI and robotics. And I've always included ethics units in my AI classes over the past 20 years of teaching, but usually as a 1 week subunit. This was the first time I taught an entire course on it, and we're at the point where there's just an abundance of literature on many different topics, and I think we're going to touch on some of those today.
Thank you. Boy, there is so much to, even from these opening remarks, there's so much more we could get into. I was going to ask you at the outset how AI is affecting our daily lives. You've already kind of cued that question in talking about the presence and omnipresence right now of ChatGPT. That was kind of preceded in the fall by so much talk about some of the visual generative AI around DALL-E and Midjourney. Are these the best ways to start to apprehend artificial intelligence in our daily lives? Is ChatGPT, is it the godsend for society to wake up and begin to talk about ethics and AI and all of these challenges? Maybe I'll ask Will, since you were eloquently talking about the positive spin of ChatGPT and the ways in which it's become a lingua franca. What are your thoughts on this? It sounds as if you believe this has been a really positive step.
So yes, I do think it's a very positive step, because it gets the conversation going. And then from my vantage point, and Peter's probably seen this in his world, within the ChatGPT context, the question is, where are they getting this information from? What is the data set? Well, it turns out, as it impacts the business that I'm in now, is that some of that data is actually copyrighted data that companies like ours own. So what happens is that's going to move it from a cultural conversation now to a legal context. Now, who owns the data? So the lawyers get involved. The benefit in my opinion, to that is that now it elevates the discussion to various rights. So within intellectual property, there's also elements called moral rights. Once you start talking about moral rights and intellectual property, then that actually elevates the ethical discussion, because now there are more powerful stakeholders who have an interest in driving that discussion and in creating the rules of the road. That's the only way you're actually going to operationalize ethics. Now, there's also another lever, which is the political lever, which is that the public, the general public, makes a demand on the government or makes a demand on corporations for accountability. Now, those public demands usually only happen when something goes terribly wrong. Unfortunately, every day there are use cases of things going terribly wrong. Because as soon as AI at its core is essentially using computers to essentially replace what we would consider to be human intelligence or human decision-making. The more that decision-making gets outsourced to computers, it's not so much like the public will or the public values, but it's really the programmers and the developers. Their values are what actually get put in, and those usually in most cases have not been publicly vetted. There has not been a public consensus around those values that are in any given use case. So I don't think we're going to see an incredible amount, not to be less hopeful than I was in the beginning, but I don't think we see an incredible amount of movement on embedding ethics in AI until two things happen. One is what Ken's doing now, and what sounds like Peter's doing as well, which is before people become practitioners as their students. So if we have STEM high schools, then ethics should be taught in high schools. When we have colleges, in the case of colleges, not only should it be embedded, but it should also be a requirement for graduation. So that it's in the hearts and the minds of practitioners in every use case, in everything that they develop, as opposed to being just another step in the workflow or a regulation or compliance or a task that has to be checked off, but it has to be at the heart of the use cases and the technology that's being designed and developed.
Ken, you were nodding your head pretty vigorously there for a moment. Do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I very much agree with everything that Will just said. I think that we have a moment here with ChatGPT and DALL-E and other generative AI that it's really foregrounded AI in a way that a lot of AI that's become part of our everyday lives has become ubiquitous. A lot of it has been fairly behind the scenes, and the degree to which it is AI and the inherent limitations and ethical considerations that emerge from that hasn't really been foregrounded in the public discourse. So, for example, Pew Research Center just put out a new study earlier this month, I think last week, and they were looking at how aware the public is of the AI that we're already using in our everyday lives. And they had 6 examples of everyday applications of AI: fitness trackers, chatbots, product recommendations, monitored security cameras, music recommendations, and spam filters. And less than a third, only 30% of the US public could identify that all 6 of those are facilitated by AI. So we're using AI in so many different aspects of our lives, but we're not necessarily consciously thinking about the degree to which those recommendations that are being made are based on, in most cases, prior data. One of the important considerations there is, of course, we have the saying garbage in, garbage out. So if you have really faulty, flawed data, then you have the potential for the recommendations to also be really flawed and faulty. We saw this with Microsoft's Tay, where you had a lot of 4chan and 8chan users. The idea was Twitter was going to teach a chatbot how to interact, and maybe different people would have different views on which Twitter users they would want to be practicing interaction with. and there were some really unpleasant sort of behaviors and responses that they created later. So they removed it. Now we've got, Bing's instantiation of Sydney, and we've had a lot of, popular press reporting on this, a lot of, very unexpected responses from this particular chatbot. It's a large language model that, there's a huge ton of training data involved, but the same issues arise that you have with the Compass system that ProPublica demonstrated. It's used, it was originally for being a recommender for parole officers, but it got used by judges to make sentencing decisions as an input to their sentencing decision. It's based on decades of racist data from racist judges in a systemically racist society. So of course it makes racist recommendations. You have facial recognition algorithms that Hulamwini and Gebru have shown are both racially and gender biased in very problematic ways. So, as we understand that it is AI, it has these limitations, hopefully we can be aware of things like algorithmic bias, and that we shouldn't just take whatever recommendation the AI is giving us as being some kind of divinely inspired truth, but rather the product of prior responses and a product of the society, with all of the great things about our society, but all of the systemic inequities in our society as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask Peter to perhaps pick up on that theme. That was a great offering of some of the problems we've already realized and seen with the use of algorithms in various systems. Peter, how do you think about the most pressing and the tangible issues that these systems present to all of us that make our work so very pressing? And risks and benefits are frequently the ways that we talk about that. I do sometimes wonder if that kind of binary is the way we should be thinking about these systems.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd like to start by underscoring what Ken started off with, which is that artificial intelligence is already impacting our everyday lives in many ways that people don't recognize. And it's very tempting to always think of the latest, greatest, development as that's what artificial intelligence is, that ChatGPT is AI or DALL-E is AI. Not at all the case. And the examples Ken gave are great. AI influences go back even further than that. The technology that you have in your microwave that will automatically stop when the potato is hot. You just press the automatic, you used to not, that did not used to exist. And that's sort of an early, sort of expert system version of artificial intelligence. And when I was a PhD student, and all through, I think the 1990s still, it was an active research topic in artificial intelligence to try to get voice recognition systems to be good enough to just understand your credit card number on the telephone. And now that just happens all the time, and people don't even think of that as artificial intelligence anymore. And this is known as the AI effect paradox, that basically, people often define artificial intelligence as the trying to get computers to do things they can't do yet. But then once they can do them, it's not artificial intelligence anymore, right? Then it's engineering. And I think that's a for people in my field, we're working in technical AI, that's a great thing, right? We'll never be out of things that computers can't do yet. There'll always be new things, but it also sort of takes away the successes. And I'm sure, and I think the reason I'm bringing this up and emphasizing this is that it's tempting to say, what are the risks and benefits, or what are the ethical implications of artificial intelligence, and then answer it in the context of today's systems, in terms of ChatGPT, or in terms of DALL-E, or in terms of whatever, large language models. Of course, the facial recognition systems were the hot thing, just a few years ago, and today's artificial intelligence will no longer be the hot thing in a little while, right? And so we need to be teaching general paradigms and general concepts. We shouldn't just be saying what can we do, or what should we do, and what we shouldn't we do with today's systems. We should be thinking about what are the the implications of technology, it goes beyond artificial intelligence, of technology in general. So yeah, I think it's important for this is something I always sort of insist on in settings like this, is that people recognize that there's not one thing artificial intelligence. There's artificial intelligence is a name of, it refers to a collection of technologies, an ever-changing collection of technologies. And as Will was saying, because it's ever-changing, it means that there are people who are students now who will be developing the next systems, and it's important for them to learn the lessons from today, and to maybe head off the missteps, and to build in right from the start, and think ahead to, oh, I have this new, latest and greatest technology. What could it be used for if it got into the wrong hands? Or what are the harmful side effects, even if it, people weren't trying to use it for harm? And that's why this now, and now we have very salient examples of this that we can use as case studies, that people can learn from. And I think, to me, it's a fantastic development. It's that people are becoming conversant in both the breadth and possibilities of the technology, and the breadth and richness of the possible use cases for good and both for good and for bad.
Yeah, you're really moving us closer to something I definitely wanted us to talk about, having to do with education and how we approach education. Before we move into that squarely, though, you also accessed the idea, all of you have accessed the idea that multiple disciplines and multiple perspectives can help us see AI for what it is, understand it better, and perhaps even consider the range of applications and untoward and toward consequences. So why, this is, of course, the hallmark of good systems as well, bringing multiple disciplinary perspectives together to study artificial intelligence. Why do you think it's important to bring multiple disciplines and sectors into this conversation? And maybe I could ask Will to address this at the outset. What do you, since you so nicely complimented good systems and your involvement with good systems, how do you think about what we can achieve talking to each other, working together, as opposed to industry off here, academia off here, public policy off in its corner?
So first, the global answer is AI by definition touches every segment and subgroup of the human population, and it also touches every discipline and every industry. So any discussion that happens that doesn't convene a broad range of stakeholders is a waste of everybody's time. And so that's the reason why I enjoy coming to Good Systems events. And I've been to a lot of ethics events. The best ones are the ones who bring in stakeholders from a wide variety of disciplines, because, to be honest, there are a lot of blind spots when we're all going about our daily work and things that we don't necessarily think about. Now, what this means for education varies, but there's one thing that's always in common. So I'll give you kind of like 3 quick examples. So I taught a course at Penn State Law School on AI and ethics. So in the legal discipline, and I haven't gone to law school, but in the legal discipline, we use the case method. So what was most impactful for the students in that course was going through individual use cases in either the regulation, policy, or law that was implicated or impacted by that use case. Now, I've also taught at a guest lecturer at UT in computer science with Karen Langholt in her business ethics course. There, business has a tendency to think more in terms of strategy. And so in that context, the discussion about ethics, we really were able to frame that into, as you're developing, whether you're going through the product development process or you're going through the strategy development process, here is how you put ethical vetting into your overall in business framework. Then also with IEEE, I created a course for high school students in STEM education. at that point, those students need to be introduced to ethics, because a lot of them haven't taken a philosophy course. A lot of them, they're not as well read as they will be over time. And then there we introduce them to ethics. But I keep this definition for whether it's high school, college, or law school. It starts with this: what is ethics? Ethics is concerned with the well-being of humans. If it positively impacts humans, is ethical. If it negatively impacts humans, it's unethical. That's something that at every stage of education, people can learn, even going back all the way to elementary school and the golden rule: do unto others as you want them to do unto you. These values and foundational principles can be taught. And even as you move up to different levels, or if you're convening different industries, it should always start with a common value system. We have to agree on what is ethical, or what ethics is, or what ethics is concerned with. If we don't agree with that, then it doesn't matter what else we're talking about, because we're going to have different values. And so my last point on this is, in my last company, we did a lot of defense work, a lot of intelligence community work. A lot of it was geopolitical considerations. So the things that we were developing were in the geopolitical context. At root of all that, whether people agree with, these military applications, or even some people don't even agree we should even have a military. But what we do agree with is that we have a worldview, or at least we were advocating a worldview that was based on democratic principles. And within that, that's how we derive ethics. And as we perceived it, we were in a global or geopolitical competition with other entities that did not share that worldview and have that same point of view on freedom. And the way we were able to coalesce our stakeholders was around those shared values. If we can agree on the values, then we can figure everything else out. And I think that's where Peter made a good point, like irrespective of the use case, irrespective of what year you're teaching this course, or what year of these, every fifth year of these annual volumes, there will be a starting point, which is, what are ethics? What are we trying to preserve? What is the yardstick that we're measuring our use case by? And I think that's critically important at every level.
That's a great segue into asking both Peter and Ken about the content of what we need to learn when we teach ethics and AI. And actually, there's already some questions from our audiences about K through 12 education. Should it, or does it, mandate ethics and philosophy? And there was a question as well from somebody who said, how could a person of the general public, begin to learn more about ethical AI? All three of you have taught ethics in AI. Maybe I could give Ken and Peter a chance to talk about it within the pedagogical structure of the university, and then open it up more broadly to other remarks from all of you. Ken, would you like to talk about some of the initiatives that you've been privy to?
Yeah, happy to, Sharon. One example actually of making ethics classes mandatory is in the informatics major that, as you mentioned, we just launched in the fall of 2021. We actually do have a required course in ethical foundations for informatics. And that was something, alongside programming for informatics, statistics for informatics, research methods for informatics, as one of the fundamental skills that we think the informatics professionals of today need and tomorrow need. And that was something that was remarked on very favorably as the proposal went through the faculty council and beyond, as something that was, really innovative about this program and really timely about this program. One of the concentrations in the program is human-centered data science, which is basically getting at the societal implications of data science, AI, machine learning. So it's really an opportunity for students to engage deeply with, as they're learning the technical side, simultaneously learning the ethical dimensions. And that's certainly one of the important lessons that we've learned from the literature on AI ethics education is that standalone courses are great, but they're not sufficient. They need to be reinforced throughout the curriculum. So as Peter was mentioning, always including ethics as a consideration, even in a very technical course. That's a best practice. That's really important. So it needs to be, it can't just be one class that maybe students do or don't pay attention to, and then the rest of their education is purely technical, no consideration of ethical or societal factors whatsoever. It needs to be embedded across the curriculum. So that's something that we do in all the educational efforts that we have in Good Systems UT Grand Challenge. I guess the one that's been most in the news recently, so there's the new Masters in AI that Adam Clivens and Peter Stone and others have been involved in putting together. It's UT Austin is fortunate to be the home of one of the first 5 NSF AI institutes, the Institute for Foundations of Machine Learning. Fortunately, Institute for Foundations of Machine Learning partnered with Good Systems to provide the ethics plan for IFML, and including developing a course in ethics in AI that we'll be offering starting next spring. So we're really excited about partnering with IFML on the MSAI program, incorporating ethics in AI as part of the content. And also, again, there are other Good Systems team members involved in the MSAI, ensuring that ethics is going to be across the curriculum, not just in that one course. And I want to go back to something that Will said about the challenge in ethics is getting people to agree on things. That's so true. And this is, we live in a global society. And it's not just that people might have different views about what decision should be made in a certain circumstance, but even how to come to a decision, even how to think about ethical decision making, even within the sort of Western context. We have deontology versus consequentialism. Do we think about the intentions or do we think about the consequences? And then when you broaden that to the whole world, you have so many different ethical traditions, and even within and across societies, we haven't come to consensus about what's the right thing to do in many different circumstances. So it's really important, I think, that students are considering the broad range of values, as Will was saying, for that are held by individuals and groups and across societies in the world. So when I teach ethics in AI, whether it's in the MSAI program or as I teach as part of the NSF Research Traineeship Program and Portfolio Program in Ethical AI that I'm sure Peter will talk more about in the context of his great course and others, or in our informatics major in the School of Information, that I cover a combination of ethical perspectives. So half of the ethical perspectives are actually non-Western ethical perspectives. It also includes feminist ethical perspectives. So to me, it's important. It's a contemporary global ethical perspective that we take. Thanks.
Thanks. And actually, you've addressed several of the questions that have come up from the audience. I want to give Peter a chance to also talk about these educational initiatives and how you see it. Maybe you could address whether you seem to be saying it should be required of, I'll say, technologists, if not computer scientists specifically. Do you feel that way?
Yeah. So, and this actually touches on a question I see in the quick Q&A from Pratik that I wanted to touch on, and sort of the interdisciplinary nature of artificial intelligence. In fact, AI has always been interdisciplinary. When I got into AI, it's traditionally the sort of the purview of a computer science department. That's usually where the nexus of artificial intelligence research has happened. Traditionally, it's now expanding much more broadly than that. But if you went back only a few years ago, that's where all the AI was coming out of, or most of it. But when I got into artificial intelligence, my starting point was that I felt like I was trying to understand one of the biggest scientific mysteries of our time. And a colleague of mine sort of listed the 3 big scientific mysteries of our day as: how did the universe begin? How did life start on Earth? And then what's the nature of intelligence? How does the brain, how does the brain work? What's this mystery of how do we do intelligent things? And as a student, as I was starting to get into this, there were many different fields that I could approach this from. You could look at it from neuroscience. How does the brain work? At the molecular level. There's psychology, which was more also how does the brain work, but more at a behavioral or phenomenological level. And then there was computer science, where there was AI, and that's where I sort of latched on, and for various reasons that I could expand on. But and then there is sort of a field that brings these together that started around that time called cognitive science, which is sort of the merging of neuroscience, psychology, computer science, and also always has had a philosophical component to it. There's it's philosophy and like, is it possible for computers to think? For computers to be intelligent? What does it mean to be intelligent? Philosophers have always been part of the artificial intelligence conversation. And so there's always been this sort of interdisciplinary aspect to it. And then when it comes to like, what do students need at the K-12 level or, an undergraduate level when they're learning about artificial intelligence? In fact, we often have school groups come through the lab for demonstrations of our robots and systems. And when they ask me, which they often do, what do I need to do? What do I need to, to learn if I'm going to be a graduate student in computer science and artificial intelligence? And my answer has always been that they need to do well in their math classes and science classes, but even at least as important, if not more so, is they have to become good writers and good, sort of thinkers. And that's always, this may be apocryphal, but I've heard that somebody did a statistic of how much computer science majors write in their career, including technical documents and specifications, compared to English majors, and that computer scientists ended up writing more. And that, this is just, it's an important skill, a communication skill. And, that I think now, philosophy, ethics is one of these skills. It's not just that you can become a researcher in artificial intelligence by doing well in your computer science classes. You need to have this breadth of experience, and that's why when I taught my intro to AI, ethical AI and robotics class in the fall, I put the link to that, by the way, or a way to find the syllabus to that class, which has a list of readings. I put that in the answers in the Q&A. I co-instructed it with Tina Peterson, who is trained as a humanist. She's employed in the computer science department here, but her background is in the humanities. And I think that was very important to be teaching this class, even though it was to mainly computer science grad students, to have two of us with different perspectives and different backgrounds and training, being able to answer the same questions. And so, yes, I think I would never recommend that at the K-12 level, even a student who knows they want to be a scientist, they should not be focusing on just math and science. They should be getting a well-rounded training in all of these areas. And I've always insisted to my kids, they're all going into STEM, but they all became good writers because of this. And I think that's just always going to be essential. And ethics and philosophy is just another extension of that in my book. It's not new.
This matter of success comes up in several of the questions that the audience has posed here. And it reminds me of something that you, Will, said early on when you were talking a little bit about your work with different companies with different pressures. And you observed that with a larger company, now there are quarterly earnings pressures. And that sort of relates to Jane Neal's question about ethical practices in business success. And Jane's question is, do you believe ethical practices will result in business success in terms of making money? Do good people win? A pithy way of maybe putting it. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think going all the way back to the Indus River Valley in the beginning of civilization and trading systems, trust was at the heart of it. When harvest comes at this point, I will bring these goods. When your harvest of hunting comes, you will bring these goods. We will trade. That's how we will survive. As we've evolved over a couple of decades, there is so much abundance that there's not so much at stake on each individual trade or transaction or human interaction. So as a result, greed sets in. Sometimes the trust goes away. The relationship is not as important. And then the more we create technologies that disintermediate the relationships between human to human, the more likely we are to cheat or go for the advantage. There are tons of studies in business on this, tons of studies on trading on this, that the less human, which is the reason why people are willing to say things on social media that they would never say face to face. So as things evolve, then trust is not as an important component of that equation. The only way that we get that level of trust back into the equation, I think, starts at education at the very beginning, which is more, now this is where somebody's asking the question, do you think politics is going to get in the way? Yes, schools have become politicized at every level. So that's going to come into the debate about whether or not we agree on an existing value system. I mean, there are debates now on what human beings are. There are debates over what is the natural yearning of human beings. Some things that we would take for granted, we can't take for granted anymore. And then there's also the reluctance to adopt a point of view in public. So if you were to say, and this, it has become politicized with the values. So if you introduce a value and somebody says, well, that's a Western way of thinking. Well, yes, it is. I'm in America. Like, I don't teach, it's the same reason why we use the imperial system in a lot of cases. It's the same reason why we still teach in English. Like, you have to find a way to advance your cultural point of view while also still being tapped in to ethics and the overall benefits that need to be developed for humanity. Like, we have to find a way. Like, I just believe that the more we move towards what is a so-called neutral point of view, it actually turns out that we're really not advocating values for anyone. And it makes it much easier for the quote unquote AI to take over at that point, because we haven't defined fully and we haven't come to a consensus on what it means to be a human being, what are our values, and what do we stand for. I'd much rather have the wrong point of view clearly articulated in order to debate it than to adopt no point of view in order to avoid the debate. And then I saw another question real quick about major. Should it be required? Yes. Starting in high school, especially at STEM high schools. I love what Peter said. Yes, it should be required at that point. And definitely in college, every professional discipline without question. And then the second question was, will there be majors in the future? Well, now the University of Cambridge already offers a major in AI and ethics. It's a master's program, but I think it'll be, the evolution will be very similar to lead programs in business schools. So 30 years ago, there were only a couple. So just the way University of Texas, I think Harvard, some and Stanford, some are kind of leading the way on ethics education right now in AI. 30 years ago, there were only a few business schools that had lead programs. Now, literally every business school has a lead program, and it's a core part of their foundational curriculum. And they have required courses in leadership and ethics that you have to take in order to get those degrees. And I think that's inevitable in engineering and computer science. Now, which of those disciplines leads the way? I don't know, but I have a feeling that it'll be a president and a provost who had a legal background who will then mandate it, or it'll be the head of development who says that, you know what, we can raise a lot of money if we had an AI ethics program, and it will help us grow the university. It'll probably come from some external force like that. That's what happened in business schools. Corporations demanded it, and so then every business school put it into effect.
Wow. The time is really flying here, and we have some terrific questions. I think just following along with the theme of ethics training and educational programs that can productively address it, the matter of standards or a consensus on what should be taught comes up from the audience, and whether there are some models that we should look at, that everybody should look at to say, yeah, this is the right way to do it, and that should then be exported or more broadly publicized and made available. Do you have any thoughts on this? And I'm looking at Peter and Ken at this point on that particular question.
I think we're still too early to have developed and to have crystallized on the right way. It's still a very quickly evolving field. The best practices, I think, people are developing one-off courses, and then I don't think there's yet to be a standard textbook. Maybe that will come at some point, and that will help standardize. So I think there's not yet something that can just be exported. When I taught the course, I looked around at other people's courses and pulled various aspects from them and then put my own twist on it. I do want to give just circle back a little bit to the question that you asked earlier of like, who wins, and this, and there was also a question in the chat about the access of artificial intelligence in the homeless community. And I think, this is something that again is now very, very salient, that artificial intelligence is a technology that should be improving the productivity of our people, of our workforce in general, right? Sort of people, there's a lot of talk about replacing jobs and things like that. Usually it's not so much replacing jobs, it's usually changing the nature of the job or augmenting the job, doing part of the job, or changing what jobs are available. And that's something that can be sort of concerning to people, but overall it should be making the pie bigger, the overall pie, the productivity of, and then the question is that how is that pie divided? And that's the political question, right? Is the bigger pie being concentrated in fewer hands, and therefore sort of exacerbating disparities, or is it being shared equitably? And that's why economics faculty or economics experts now are delving into AI, and it gets tied to questions like, should there be a universal basic income and things like that. And that's a long extended discussion we probably don't have time for here, but with regards to the homeless, access to the homeless and impacts, this I think is really important, that a lot of right now, so traditionally AI development was done, the new technologies came out of universities, typically, and maybe research labs, but like public research labs, government labs, things like that. Now a lot of it is happening in private industry, where just necessarily or by nature, the efforts are going to be concentrated most on the applications that can make money, as opposed to the ones that can do that can serve the public good. And it's, I think, really incumbent on government funding sources, National Science Foundation and others, to sort of funnel money back to the public institutions, to universities, to focus on topics that are not going to lead to direct economic impact, but that will help help people who otherwise might be overlooked by the reach of artificial intelligence technologies. And so that's why that you do see sort of efforts on AI for social good. And I give a call out to one of my close colleagues, Milan Tambe at Harvard, who's come and talked at Good Systems before, and has done some great work on sort of studying the impacts of how AI can be used to benefit homeless communities. So I think there's if you that would be the keyword to look up, is AI for social good. And I've given talks before on how some of my research can be applied to social good. But I think it's the key point here is that it's not going to happen naturally if the AI development is coming from the large for-profit corporations, that we have to deliberately direct public funding towards those efforts.
We're going to have to wrap up now. Unfortunately, I feel as if we're just diving into some of the most provocative material to talk about with respect to AI. But let me give our panelists like 1 minute to offer some final thoughts, beginning with you, Ken.
Yes, thanks, Sharon, and thanks everyone here. This has been a fabulous conversation. I did want to talk to that question that Peter was citing by R.D. Childers. And an example of what the National Science Foundation is doing currently. So NSF has a fairly new program. They're in the second iteration now, called the Civic Innovation Challenge. It's a collaboration with Metro Lab, which is a nonprofit. And the goal is to leverage technologies in AI in very concrete ways to benefit society, benefit communities. And so one of the NSF Civic Innovation Challenge projects is led by Sherry Greenberg of the LBJ School of Public Affairs, also with Min Kyung Lee and Steve Sloda in the iSchool. In that project, we are leveraging AI to try to improve services for people experiencing homelessness and try to empower people experiencing homelessness to be aware of great resources that are available and to make recommendations about where resources should be made available in the future. So that's one concrete example. There's a larger movement of public interest technology. The idea that technology needs to serve the public interest. I think, Peter, that resonates very well with your point about where public funding should go. We can see a lot in the CHIPS Plus Science Act, where there's the opportunity to create more emphasis on public interest technology. And I guess one last example I'll give is a project that we're doing is a core research project in Good Systems on smart hand tools. And in this project, instead of thinking about how AI can replace workers, which happens, I mean, that's artists and writers are now worried about that. Folks in manufacturing and service economy, et cetera, have been worried about that for quite a while. Eventually, there's that possibility for everyone. But we're trying to say, how can AI actually be literally put in the hand of workers? How can we make the work that's done safer, more efficient through the incorporation of AI into smart hand tools? Thank you.
Thanks. We're typical, well, not you, Will, so much, but we're typical academics and pushing at the edge of our allotted time. Peter and Will, 1 minute, final thoughts, and then I'll thank our hosts and we'll wrap up.
No, I think we covered a lot of ground today. I learned today about a lot of work that I didn't realize was going on at Good Systems at the University of Texas in Ken and Peter's work. So I'm very happy that I learned that, because that's going to drive me to the Good Systems website to learn more about what's been posted and updated. So I'll definitely do that. And then another resource I see people are asking in the chat, 2 other places. I think there's Good Systems. Then Harvard Law School has the Berkman Center for Internet and Society that I'm an affiliate of. There's a principled AI governance. So if you go there, you can track a lot of topical articles and research. They do a pretty good job of compiling. And then the last one, many of you know, Kay Firth Butterfield, who's at the World Economic Forum, who's ahead of the artificial intelligence and machine learning platform. And there are actually a bunch of toolkits and frameworks for corporate boards, corporate executives, and technologists to use based on research that they've done that can actually help people in work in their daily lives. Thank you again for the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
Thanks. Peter?
Yeah, really quickly. So, I mean, I did post on my the link to my webpage that has, you know, the courses and talks. I encourage people there to look at the course on ethical AI and robotics in the syllabus there. Also, like I said, I have a talk linked, at least one there on AI for social good, or machine learning and artificial intelligence and AI agents for social good. I'd also just, you know, quickly say, there's a question in the chat about how can the law keep up with this? And this is, you know, sort of a wrap up, I think, for us. You know, what we've always needed, and this is one of the messages from the AI 100 report, the first one in 2016. We need more people trained in AI getting into the public sector and getting into you know, non-technical positions, and so that the policymakers, the lawmakers are not learning about artificial intelligence from science fiction, but actually have the training. And so, you know, I think it's great for STEM experts to have the training in the humanities, but it's also important for humanities experts and policy people to have training in artificial intelligence and STEM. And I encourage all of you, no matter what you do, to keep up and keep educating yourselves, and we're always happy to provide resources.
Thank you. And with that, thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to the audience for joining us for this discussion. Please stay connected with us to continue the conversation. If you'd like more information about Good Systems, we have a website. You can easily follow us on Twitter or email us. I want to give a plug to the talk tomorrow morning by Robin Wall Kimmerer, since she is one of the really amazing thinkers right now on ethical thinking in the sciences. So thank you. Hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.